Welcome everyone to another Devoxx UK 2025 speaker interview. I have together with me now Alvin Bryan, who has done a very interesting session here at Devoxx UK 2025. It's his first time attending Devoxx UK and any Devoxx. And I would be interested to find out more about Alvin as a first-time speaker for the Devoxx audience. So Alvin, welcome. What do
Thank
you
you.
do in your day-to-day job? What your interests? And yeah, please share us more how you felt here, how do you feel the conferences and so on.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here in this beautiful venue. The sun is shining outside, and it's reflected because we have all these like beautiful sort of things in the ceiling. So yeah, it looks great. Um, so what do I do? Why am I here? All that stuff. Yes, I work as a developer advocate for a company called Yoto. My interests, so I wasn't talking about that obviously, but so my interests are more like I'm from background with like games and data viz, so my interests are more like anything visual, things that look beautiful, like beautiful experiences for users on screen. And so behind all that is like all the computer graphics and all that
Oh,
discipline, right? So this was what the talk was about. So about some computer graphics technique that are behind that, what happens when you draw a line on Snapchat, what happens with how the curves that you're using in Illustrator, to make like illustrations and all that,
mhm.
or Figma, or like all of that stuff. So the computer graphics techniques behind this, also a little bit behind like fonts, yeah. So all of that stuff.
Speaking about that, because I'm assuming that you have quite a depth in understanding those, do you have any preferred technology that you like to dive into, like when you understand these concepts? Because probably you want to try some of these on your own, not just
Yeah,
knowing the theory and how it
yeah. Of
works.
course, it's very boring. Yeah,
So, what actually do you use for testing, let's say, the theory and how this works
yeah,
to prove that it actually works? What kind of technologies, what
yeah,
languages, and so on?
yeah. I'm a front end person because of
Oh,
all of these things, right? So all the games and all the data viz and all that. So I've been coding in JavaScript for more than 10 years now, so everything's been around this. But for all this stuff, when you need like a quick thing of like, let me move things around, I always go for a technology called P5, which is
mhm.
like a JavaScript version of a Java technology called processing, which
Okay.
people here would be familiar with. So it's all about like creating, people make generative art and all these things with it, but for me, it's always the best way of like having something visual very quickly. Oh, let's see how I can arrange these circles. Like for in my talk, let's see how I can make a visualization of like how curves work and how to go from one point to another. So I always kind of reach out for this. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. And all from it. You mentioned games. So these techniques that you explained today are also used by games. So can we really develop, let's say, with JavaScript, a game and make it feel like really, really nice and using all the techniques that you explained today?
Well, yeah. You need a lot like
A lot more.
to
Okay.
make a game.
So we
So
need to invite you
there's a
for a deep
lot.
dive.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's a lot. Games we need rendering, right? So you need in JavaScript you need WebGL, you need sound. If you have any sort of like collisions, then you need physics. Then you're going to need some sort of animation engines for like the players or even UI animation. There's a lot going on. It goes into a game much beyond that, but it's still used in games. For example, it's the example that I gave during the talk. Like if you want to create some kind, maybe like a train track.
Okay.
So you have a bunch of points, and then you want to make sure something curves really nicely along these points, then you can use one of the techniques I described in the talk. So it's still used for lots of things. It's used for camera movements as well. If you're
Oh,
making a 3D game, so there's a little bit like this is one of the a very specific thing that you would use in the game, and this is how I first came up with it because I actually don't exactly remember. I think it might have been for a camera movement.
oh, really?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's a good question. How did I discover that curve first? Either it was for data viz, like if you had the line chart and you wanted to make it curve nicely. I think that was for this.
Mhm.
I think that's how either this or a camera movement. I can't fully remember. Yeah,
So your talk was about how computers scribble all
yeah,
these for us
yeah,
and understanding these techniques. But nowadays we live in this era of everything being generated for us by
yeah.
AI, and
Of
we
course.
see that a lot of code, a lot of digital art is being generated with or by AI.
Yeah.
So do you think that these techniques are being grasped maturely by AI? How do you take this in the context of AI? This knowledge that you have in the context
Yeah.
of AI, can they replicate your knowledge
Yeah, for
and
sure.
your implementation
Yeah.
without any issues?
Well, so I think there's two things, right? There's one, why should we care when AI writes all the code, right?
Okay.
So which is the first one, which is what you were saying, everything is generated for us. So that I think is, well, number one is because it's interesting. Like you don't need to be a historian to appreciate history, right?
Sure.
Like tons of people go to museums and go to a lot of things, and they like learning about like this specific history of a specific language, or like so like how this language came about, like etymology, how this word came about. Like you don't need to be a linguist to care about all that. It's because it's fun for some people, and a lot of times these people end up being developers, and that's the audience. So that's one about like what caring about this stuff in AI. And number two, I think for AI, often you have to give it primitives. You have to give it stuff to, because you could say, right, have this, and going back to the example of a train,
Yeah.
I have these points, have this train move along these points, right? Go for it. And then you could say, yeah, this doesn't look quite right, which is true. But if you could be more precise, say, hey, can you make these points, can you make a smooth curve that goes through it? Then maybe I will be, yes, I can use this technique. But if it doesn't, which sometimes it doesn't, I mean, I've not tested that one in particular. But if it doesn't, it's because sometimes it's good to you give it a solution to, oh yeah, can you implement it with this technique? And you don't have to know how it works, you have to know it exists. And a lot of times I found, it's also my experience with AI, it's like, it will try to do these things, and I'm like, have you tried doing it this way? Because I think it would be better. And this is coming from, again, like my experience. I'm not saying like sometimes AI writes a lot of the code for me, if most of it definitely. But it's good to be able to give it pointers, because otherwise you could just like make it better. It's not very good, even if you're talking to another human, right? I give you something, you're like,
Yeah.
make it better. It's like, can you be a bit more specific? Make it brighter, make it nicer, make it more. And this is kind of what we're doing with AI, like make it like The Simpsons, which obviously it has problems in its own right. But if you could make it, you could say, right, make it more like this, and then you give it again like a primitive, right? So you give it something again like so guidance. And I think this is where it could be useful, is knowing a lot of these guidance to be like, yeah, make it work like this. And these are specific things that are documented, exist. Yeah.
So pretty much, if we are grasping the concepts well and we manage to transcribe that to an AI, they can replicate that into scribbling as
Yeah,
good
or
as
whatever,
us.
or whatever. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, this is computer stuff, so it's this is just the primitives of the software. So if you wanted to make your own, very basic Figma, even though I highly discourage to trying to do that, but yeah, but I think again it applies like in lots of like other fields. It's just a general thing of like being able to guide AI with like specific pointers is very useful.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people like saying that they can make their own products nowadays thanks to
Yeah.
prompts given to AI.
Yeah.
But obviously, you still need to understand the concepts to make sure that they actually do the right thing, as you mentioned earlier. To wrap up a bit our conversation, can you please tell me like some takeaways that you have for our audience from your talk that you had today, or in general from learning how the computers are scribbling?
Yeah. So I think again, like there's everything in computers, and like you already know this, is infinitely deep. Like networking, all the backend, like everything has a million layers of things happening. And diving into a few things is actually quite fun. You might not necessarily use it in the future, but it's so interesting. There's a lot of times also it comes back quite far away. Like some of the techniques that I mentioned, some go back to like I think 1976, I think, and it's still used today. And it's interesting to know about how it came about. Like it also can lead you in interesting directions. So in my talk, I start with I start with just pencils on Snapchat, and then I end up talking like researching about Pixar and how it came about and its co-founders, and then based on that, I might end up like, because one of the co-founders of Pixar like ended up being there for 30 years and writing a book and all that, and you might end up then reading that book, which you find really interesting, even though you started looking at how can I make this line a bit better. So it's all about this process of like experimentation and all of that. So I think this is still fun in the age of AI or not. So I encourage you to just have fun. I think in general, even with AI, have fun. That's it.
Okay, that's good. AI for fun.
Yeah.
Another takeaway. Thank you
Yeah,
very much,
of
Alvin,
course.
for joining me today
Mm.
and for your insightful talk.
Yeah.
It's a very different flavor than, probably the majority of Java talks that we
Yes.
have
Yeah.
here, but we
Definitely.
love
Yes.
to have diversity in terms of topics and in terms of interest. And
Mm.
as always, we create better things and better products and better software by knowing more about other
Exactly.
fields as well, not necessarily what is interesting right now and what we're developing right
Yeah.
now. Is good to be aware of as many things as possible so that we can have a good choice when we're implementing our software later on. Thank you
Yeah.
again for
Of course.
joining us.
Thank you.
And folks,
Yeah.
stay tuned, watch the videos from Devoxx UK 2025 and continue learning.